My guest for today is Adina Pignatare. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to have you here and uh, hear all about your journey.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So, Adina, where are you from?
Southwick, Massachusetts.
Okay. What did your mom and dad do for a living when you were growing up?
My mom did an independent mail run and cleaned houses, and then my dad was a truck driver.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So, no hairstylists in the family?
My aunt was a hairdresser, and she was the cool aunt, no kids, so she was the fun one. And I loved going to the salon and hanging out over there.
What did you like about it?
It was just a fun environment, and people felt pretty, and who doesn't want to be around like good feeling people? And everyone
Yeah.
seemed to be having like a good time.
Yeah. I always thought that too when I was little. Like, salons have such a cool vibe. Like, when you walk into them, like everybody's chatting and like it
Yeah.
smells, like the smell of a salon. So, yeah, I agree with that totally. So, what kind of things did you do when you were growing up?
I was really into art and different, like I liked scrapbooking. I didn't do any sports or anything like that. Anything that was like team related, I would get nervous that I would ruin it for everyone else. So I didn't do much that kind of thing. It was just more anxiety on my end. But I liked doing like individual stuff like the art, scrapbooking, things like that.
Okay. So, how old were you when you knew you wanted to start doing hair?
I actually have a piece of paper, when you were a kid and they would give you like, draw yourself like with your hair and everything and
Mhm.
all the questions on the side. And one of these pieces of paper from like fourth grade, it said, I wanted to be a hairdresser or a dispatcher.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like
That's
so
really funny.
polar opposites, but yeah.
So, why did you choose hair?
I knew college wasn't for me and I liked doing hair. So that was never I always just knew that I wanted to go into hair.
Yeah.
So
I hear that a lot on this podcast. Like, people, a lot of times they just know. Like, for a lot of times from a young age as well, which I think is
right.
really interesting. Like, you just, it's a magnet and you automatically know what you're going to do.
Yes, I can, I feel like I always knew. It was just a matter of like where to go. And there was never a question. You know what I mean? It was just what
Hmm.
I wanted to do. I mean, everyone try to talk me out of it. And it's funny
Yeah.
now because they'll say to me, well, I guess we were wrong, you know?
Yeah. So, what types of things would they tell you? Because that's another thing I hear pretty often from hairstylists is that the people around them, they want what's best for you, but they try to sort of talk you out of it because they don't see your vision. So, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think like the general idea of hairdressers is that you don't make any money. Uh,
Yeah.
that you would get paid less than a minimum wage, and it's a hard job to get successful in, which it's not easy, but it's doable. My dad is the prime example. He used to always say, "Well, still go to school for business, at least get associate's degree." And I had no interest of doing that. So it's funny because he's the biggest one now that will come back and go, I was so wrong. Like you proved me wrong. And it just was stuff like that. Like just
Yeah.
still go to school, still go get an associate's degree.
Yeah. Like a backup plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your first love when you started doing hair? Like, what's the first thing that really connected with you?
I loved foiling. I loved coloring. All things
Yeah.
color was something that I enjoyed for sure.
So the next question is what type of stylist were you when you first started or are you now? Like, are you somebody who shows up early or are you somebody who's kind of like a late person? How would you describe yourself?
Well, I would say in the beginning, I was always early getting my station ready. Now I'm trying to find the balance of getting my social media going and getting to
Hmm.
work early at
Yeah.
the same time. Because, now it's kind of like having two jobs,
Mm.
is social media and doing hair. So I would say I'm usually right on time.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm just jumping forward just a little bit because it kind of lines up, but I have a fan question. And one of the questions that they wanted to ask you was how much time do you typically spend on social media?
Well, I wake up an hour early every day to, get my coffee ready, feed my cats, and I jump right onto social media and I get my posts ready. As far as like recording and editing, I would say I at least do like two clients a day. I mean, I do 12 clients a day, but at least two of them out of that day will I record and then editing. So anywhere between, I want to say like 15 hours a week.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a
that,
fair number.
that is a fair number. I would probably agree with that as well for my own, things that I do as well.
Right.
So the other question is, we talked a little bit about education before we started recording. So tell me a little bit about how you started doing education or what you want to do in the future with that.
Well, I feel like this goes with the social media thing. As time went on, I've been doing hair for 13 years. I'm fully booked behind the chair. I don't really take new clients anymore. So I looked at it like, how I don't want to own a salon either. I don't want to have that stress. I know that's not for me. I think that once I start caring about everything around me, I won't focus. That's what's in front of me. And that's the most important thing is the client.
Yeah.
So from being booked, I was like, well, how can I make more money? How can I get to the next level? And that's when I dove into social media more because I didn't really realize that you could get paid for your posting or get in with brands to make content until about 3 years ago when I went to like kind of like a retreat weekend with Purology. And then once I learned about that, I'm like, well, why am I not educating how, I want to share like how to make content because I feel like a lot of people see what I do online and they learn from my videos, but people already are so talented and they have their own techniques that really what they need to learn is how to create content for what they already know
Mm,
and
amen.
share that.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, because a lot of times when you take pictures, and I hear this a lot, you take pictures, it doesn't look the same on the person as it does in the picture. So I agree with that completely. That's really difficult to capture what it really was or what you want people to see about the process.
I mean, sometimes it looks so much better in person, but you just can't capture it on camera. And
Yeah.
it could be a lot of things. It's the camera, it's the surroundings, it's the weather, whatever. So it's just I feel like those things are really hard to know without being shown or practicing, practicing, and practicing.
Yeah.
I hope that
That's,
answered your original question.
you did.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that so many people could use that knowledge on how to capture it. I think that's an excellent online education or even in-person education at some point. I think that's a huge one because we're not photographers. We weren't in that industry, and so I think to be educated on it is really big. So my next question is kind of a big question. How long did it take before you felt successful?
Well, I feel like there's many levels of success in hairdressing. I felt successful after completing the associate's program that I went through. I felt like that was a really hard part of my career. You watch everyone around you creating really beautiful things and you can't wait to get to that. But I feel like for anyone, like assisting is a really big part of your career and learning the do's and the don'ts
Yeah,
that you would learn from somebody else. So I feel like that was one of my biggest moments was going on the floor,
yeah,
graduating from the assistant. And then from there was I remember bragging to one of my cousins being like I could live off $700 a week for the rest of my life like cuz I felt like at that point like I've made it to a level that like I didn't think could actually happen.
yeah,
So I feel like that was like 5 years in somewhere around there. And I feel like getting on the BTC team was a huge success,
yeah,
being noticed by a major brand. And then going into educating, that first class was such a high for me that I'm like, oh my God, I've made it
yeah.
in that world too. So I feel like there's many levels of success in hairstyling.
Yeah, there definitely is, and I'm so glad that you brought up, like, the assistant and all that because they're important steps to get you where you're going, and so I love that you said that because people do need to appreciate the journey as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So the next question is, how do you invest in your own success?
What would you mean by that?
So, do you take classes?
Okay.
Like, what types of things do you do to keep yourself, like, fresh?
I mean, for educating, you never can stop. And I feel like on social media, just scrolling alone is educating yourself. I realize that as I watch, certain hairstylists, all of a sudden I'm starting to do similar traits or things that I've subconsciously learned from social media. Also, like classes are huge. I did a lot in 2019, not so much in 2020 just because of, COVID and all that stuff, but I still kept up on it, for myself on how to become an educator. I definitely asked many questions on that. And also investing, like I invested into a really nice camera this year, and stands and ring lights and all those things, backdrops, I've invested in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that because I feel like a lot of hairstylists that I educate or that I come in contact with, they have a hard time getting over the hump of like what we just talked about. I'm not a photographer. So why would I invest in a really nice camera or why would I have a backdrop or all of those things? And so I think it is really important to invest in yourself and your own success, like you're saying. What is a day in your life like typically?
At the salon.
Yeah.
Well, like I mentioned before, I wake up an hour early, I get my cats and my coffee going, and then I sit down at the table and I drink my coffee and I edit the photo that I'm going to post that morning. And then I'll go to work. And I don't, I post all this beautiful, long, luscious hair, but I 100% have pixie cuts. I have your gray coverage. I do not do perms though. That is one thing. But I'm not your one-stop shop hairdresser. I do it all, which I think is transforming in the hair world. I think a lot of people are only focusing on just doing blondes or just doing brunettes. I do it all. I'll do redheads, brunettes, blondes. So I feel like my specialty is color as a whole. So I do have an associate, a full-time, 40 hours a week. Then if without her, I would not survive. And I see anywhere between 10 and 12 clients a day.
Now, how long do you think it took you to get to that point where you were seeing 10 to 12 clients a day?
Well, my first associate, which that allowed me to double book. She has been on the floor for 6 years. So I was probably doing hair for 7 years at that point, where it was becoming near impossible to book all the clients that wanted to see me. And I was working extra days to fit more people in because I didn't like saying no. And that's when the salon I work for, Designer's Edge, told me, you need an associate. We're going to pay for it. And they saw light in me. And it's been nice as I've been able to grow other stylists too for them.
Yeah, that is huge. That's great. So, basically, what types of things do you do to bring like calmness into your life? Do you do any kind of like meditation or like prayer? What types of things do you do?
I religiously get facials. That is like I'll never cancel. That is a 100% that. And then I get a monthly facial and every 3 weeks I go get a massage. Those are two things that bring, me in. I also like today, as an example, I have this scheduled with you and I have a massage at 4, but around all this, I'm just going to sit on the couch and watch TV and chill. I feel like those days are really important. I feel like that's what brings me some calm.
Yeah. I do the massage thing as well. I think I'm not as often as you. I probably do like one every 2 months. But I do think it's important because your muscles and your shoulders and everything you're doing and just get things flowing, and so I do that as well. I think that that's necessary for people who do what we do.
I agree,
So,
definitely.
my last question for you is what advice would you give to somebody who wants to do what you do?
I think the hardest thing in the beginning is to not compare yourself to others. And I still find myself in that situation where I'm like, why her, not me? How can I be like this person? And reality is that you shouldn't want to be like anyone else, that you are your own. And when people talk about like building a brand on social media, you are subconsciously without even knowing it. And I feel like your style, your vibe comes as you move along. So just to never stop and keep going. I think if your goal is to build a following, but you're not booked behind the chair, you're looking at it in the wrong direction. I say Instagram first goes for building your clientele. So that gives people a reason to continue booking or, posting on Instagram. That's my first thing is don't compare and focus on your clientele first. That's what, gives you a paycheck. And as time goes on, when you get busy so behind the chair, that's when you can focus on grabbing brands and followers. I feel is that's what's most important. And people love education. The minute I changed my page over to not just like a lookbook and it became more educational is when it blew up. So, and to never give up, because I feel like where I got my most notice was when we had shut down, lockdown for 10 weeks. And I found I was like, I don't want to disappear. And the main reason was I wanted to stay relevant in my client's life. I wanted them to still see my face and see that I'm still here, even though I wasn't able to do their hair. So I started doing tutorials, and every week I would do it and then edit the videos to have some sort of content when I wasn't able to create behind the chair. And I feel like that goes towards don't give up, keep going, and just be you. And I feel like that's the most
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, that's very, very, very inspiring because it is so true. With social media, it definitely pulls you in, and people post the best that they can post, and sometimes they put things out there that maybe aren't true, or whatever it may be. So you're exactly right. Don't compare yourself. I think those are beautiful words of wisdom for anybody at any level in hairdressing right now. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your kindness. So please give everybody your social media handles so that way they can find you, they can follow you, they can come to you for education.
My handle is my name at Adina_Pignatare. If anybody has any questions, I'm always willing to help anyone. So
Yeah.
feel
All right.
free.
Well, I love that. You are very approachable,
Thank you.
which is hard too. Sometimes in this industry, not everybody feels that way. So I appreciate your vibe and everything that you are. But, I realize that time is so extremely valuable, and I appreciate you spending your time with me today.
Of course, I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
I'm Colie Otzel, and you've been listening to America's Salon Academy, the Success Podcast. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. For more education and information, go to americassalonacademy.com. Thank you for listening.